Hello guys, this is your trainer Imran Rao, and today we are doing the IELTS academic writing task 1, and we will learn how to do that, and of course the easy way. Okay, so we can simply do it in 3 steps. Alright, the easiest way. Step number 1 is to write the introduction of your graph, chart, table or diagram. You have to write your introduction because it counts a lot, and it should be very good. It should be powerful. All right. The step number 2 is to give an overview of your graph or chart. Overview means just to give the general idea what is actually shown in that graph. And step number 3 is to give all the general details, the trends and everything. And here you're going to write each and everything regarding your graph. So let's have a look. Okay guys, here we are with step number 1, and in this step we are going to write the introduction for your given graph, chart or diagram, whatever it is. And with the help of this example we will learn how to do that, and this is a very good example I came across. So let's have a look. Let's read the topic first. Okay, now this line graph below shows the changes in the amount and type of fast food consumed by Australian teenagers from 1975 to 2000. Now summarize the information by selecting and reporting the main features and make comparisons where relevant. Okay, so this is very important that you should paraphrase this topic and you should write it in your own words. Now how you can paraphrase it, you have to change it a little bit. You have to add some words just to give the overview, just to give the idea what is this graph or chart about. Okay, so here we are. Here you can write it like this. Here we can see that we can just paraphrase it, and we can come up with this idea here that the line graph illustrates the amount of fast food consumed by teenagers in Australia between 1975 and 2000, a period of 25 years. Now this is more than enough. Okay, so what we are doing here exactly is that we are just with a little bit of paraphrasing, we come up with these words. All right, as you can see that in your topic it says the graph below shows, so we can use the alternative for that, any synonym. Here we are using illustrates. All right, and the same thing we are doing, that we are just putting some words, just changing the position of some words or saying it differently. This is called paraphrasing, just to come up with your own idea, and this is very important. So that's how we can do it, with a little bit of change. That's how we do it. Okay, now look at step number 2, and this step is called writing the overview, or giving the overview of the graph or chart or diagram. But in this step you are not actually going to write any facts and figures, but in this step, in this overview, you're just going to say something about the overall trend of your graph. As we can see here in this graph particularly, that we have 3 types of foods. All right, so one type of food, which is fish and chips, is on a decline if at the first glance you can see, and other 2 types of foods, pizza and hamburgers, are on a rise. All right, so this is the general trend which we can quote. And always, whenever we are doing, even if it's 1 chart or 2 charts or 2 graphs or 1 graphs, we can just give the overview, that what is the general idea, by looking at the graph or chart. Now this is very important because it gives the idea to your reader what is the graph saying. All right, and it has marks. Okay, now what we can do here is that we can give the this overview. We can state what is the general trend. Now here, as we can see, that we can come up with these words here. The overall trend is about the consumption of fish and chips, and which is on the decline. So we can write it like this: the overall consumption of fish and chip declined over the period. All right, so this is a very good sentence. Whereas the amount of pizza and hamburgers that were eaten at that period were on a rise. All right, so that was the general trend. Okay, so this is how we are generally going to write about that. Okay, but we cannot write any facts and figures. Again, I'm telling you this thing because after the introduction we have to give this overview. All right, and the overview will depend on our graph's overall look or the trend generally, not the facts and figures. The facts and figures we are going to quote, or we are going to discuss the facts and figures with actual amounts and actual figures in the next part, the third step, which is basically giving the general details. So that's all the overview about. Always write it, it's very good. All right, now we have this third step, and which is the most important one when you're writing your academic task 1 report, and this is called the details. All right, in which we are going to give all the details. If there are comparisons, we are going to give comparisons. If there are trends going up and down and sometimes stable, so we are going to talk about that. And of course we are going to include all the facts and figures with exact amounts and all that, but we cannot just write whatever we see, the general trends, because this time we are going to summarize it, and for this purpose we have to look at the graph closely. All right, as we can see in this graph here that we have generally 3 types of foods. All right, and the first trend which we can see is that there is a big difference between the consumption of fish and chips and the consumptions of other 2 food items, which are hamburgers and pizza. So we have to give the details here, so we can categorize it into 2 different categories. And the first one is, of course, the fish and chip one. All right, so we can see that the consumption of fish and chips started in 1975 and from 100, and it is continuously on a decline. So we can write, in 1975 the most popular fast food with Australian teenagers was fish and chips. All right, and as we can see that when it started, it was on the top. All right, the most popular food. So again, after that it was on a decline, so we can write that this was far higher than pizza and hamburgers, which were consumed approximately 5 times a year. However, apart from a brief rise again from 1980s, we can say that there's a very brief from 1980 towards a little bit of rise. You know, it's not a very significant rise, but a little bit of rise, and again it is on a decline. So we can also write about that, and it declines and it goes to around 40 items consumed per year, and that is also a good detail to write about. So we can write here, from 1980 to 1985 the consumption of fish and chip gradually declined over the 25 years, and it is finished at just under 40 times per year, or whatever way you want to write it. Again, the words count, but the details are there. And the second piece of information which we're going to include now here is about the consumption of pizza and hamburgers, which is again starting from around 5 items consumed per year, because maybe it was introduced at that time. So we are going to talk about that too. And here we can see that hamburgers are consumed more than the pizza at that time. So we can write in graph, contrast to this, teenagers are the other two fast foods at much higher levels. They ate it at much higher levels, and pizza consumption increased gradually, and it overtook the consumption of fish and chips at around 1990, the year 1990. And again, we can also give the detail that the bigger rise was seen in the hamburgers, and increasingly sharply throughout 1970s and 80s, exceeding fish and chips consumption. In 1985 it finished at the same level that fish and chip. All right, because we can see here that the hamburgers have been the most wanted food at that time. All right, so it overtook the consumption of fish and chip, and by the year 1985 and 1990, during that period it almost crossed the line and took at the very peak. All right, so we can say that it's been the most popular. So at the same level that fish and chip began, with the consumption at 100 times a year, so it crossed that level and it overtook. All right, so this is how we are talking about the general details. And of course, if there are other items, we can also include side by side, but this is just an example. All right, so what we can do is that, again, just to have a quick recap, we can say that there are 3 types of information which are required when you're writing your task 1. Number 1 is the introduction, again, which is very important, and that introduction you're going to write with the help of paraphrasing. And after that, you're going for the overview, which is the general detail about the trend of the graph or chart, the general trend. And step number 3 is to giving the general details about the graph and charts, what is actually going on, and how they are actually competing with each other. All right, so that's how we are doing it, and I guess this example would be helpful. Thank you very much.